Do not raise your hand if you have asked questions before or you are well aware of my work. This session is for those who are not, or who are new to my work and who never ask questions. If you wish to speak, you may go ahead and ask your question.
Just a question on other than prescriptions, are there other traps that you would advise someone new to your work to be aware of?
Well, the traps are all centered around societal conditioning. And perhaps one of the most pervasive, if not the most pervasive, element of societal conditioning is prescriptions, how-tos, methods, techniques, and to fall for all of such things because they are essentially they're a circular non-phenomenon which leads one stuck in quicksand forever. So basically, the traps are all related to untruth. Society basically founding itself upon untruth. And so whatever the details or whatever the branches are that stem from untruth, one of them being prescriptions, then those are all of the traps.
I see. May I ask one more follow-up question?
Okay.
Is compromise something that takes you away from the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. Hello. Thank you so much, sir, for pulling me up. I just got a short question. I've been there at your previous session as well, where you asked for a rare question. So basically, I just wanted to ask that why truth is important.
Well, if you need to have it explained to you why truth is important, then maybe you should ask yourself, what else is there? Because everything besides truth is untruth. So if you need an explanation as to why untruth is not important and truth is important, then there really is nothing more to say about that.
Hello. I heard you say once that exposure to truth and the DNA to turn one's back on society is the most powerful combination and very rare. When you say exposure, do you mean particular sources of truth? Or like I feel your writings and podcasts, etc., have truth in them based on feeling, but what exactly do you mean by exposure? Do you mean particular sources of truth?
Well, it's any source that provides direct truth would be exposure. There's no. It's not for me to tell you what that is or is not. But as long as it is direct truth, straight truth, raw truth, then the exposure to that tends to have an effect upon one who is ready, or one who demonstrates a particular degree of readiness to imbibe or receive that.
In one of your recent tweets, you stated that to a true artist, nothing is more insulting than mass appeal. If a singer has 50 songs, so what? But in this modern age, you can be great and still be ignored. And by ignored, I mean if there's like a Tiger Woods, if he never plays a Masters or a PGA Tour, nobody's going to recognize his genius if he never gets to play the game. So in order to play the game of becoming a legend, meaningless things like number of streams or number of views become meaningful, because those are the sort of PGA rankings of the music world. So were you talking more in terms of creating art, like that's the sort of mindset that brings out the purest form?
Well, I mean, you have brought a whole boatload of assumptions to this, so I didn't really hear a question there. So you have brought your own opinions and beliefs that that if someone, no one would ever be able to hear of them, and then one must at least play so and so and so, or else they would never be. I mean, I don't know what to say to your question because it isn't a real question. It is just a bunch of beliefs and opinions.
But could you like elaborate that particular tweet?
Elaborate upon what? What is there to elaborate on? if you've already perceived it in a particular way, and then you already have an answer to your perception. So you've already asked the question and you've already given your answer. So I'm not sure what else there is to talk about.
Right. Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Gupta. I first want to thank you for all your work and your words. Not sure if it's the words or how they're spoken or the level of sincerity in them. They just feel completely true. I wanted to thank you for that. I did have one question. So your work has been a source of discovering great truths and realizing them about life. If it's in a specific domain like investing or finance or getting better at technology or becoming like a CTO, uh, are there what would cause me to discover the truth seekers, the truth sayers in those domains? Should I look for people who have achieved a certain level of mastery? Would they understand truths? Is there some? So I wasn't sure how do I go about that.
No, it's honestly it's a fair question, because the truth is that you can look up any topic you want, and if you Google it, you'll get many million hits, and then the millions of search results will all be untruth. And so it really comes down not so much necessarily solely to the achievement of the individual, but to the nature of the individual. And it is, I mean, essentially what you're asking for is, to find the individual who does not prescribe. And it really is, honestly, it's practically impossible to do that. That this may be a freeing truth, or that may be a more stifling truth for you, I'm not sure. But the interesting thing is that once you know, or once one learns the foundations of truth, they basically apply to all domains. So it doesn't matter if it's finance or business or sports or whatever it is, it's all the same. Those are just details. There are the undercurrent of truths, are the undercurrent of truth. They are universal. So you don't necessarily need to find a specific person. And quite honestly, to find one who's not going to prescribe to you, it's not going to happen. So once again, all roads lead back to discovering truth rather than discovering mentorship or instruction.
Hello. Oftentimes, I heard a metaphor. It goes, "The forest doesn't care whether it's sunny or it rains." What do you think about that?
I don't think anything. Those who have not asked questions before or asked them very rarely may raise their hand if they wish.
Hi, Dr. Kapil.
Go ahead.
So I've been reading a lot of spirituality in general, especially J. Krishnamurti, and there is always a mention of this state and the issues with thoughts, and I understand that. But here's the problem which I face. There's extrapolation which happens, which is that there might be a thoughtless state. And then there are all those myths especially in Indian tradition, about what might happen thereafter, getting to know the fundamental reality of world, mystical powers, etc., etc. And I have a lot of trouble traversing what is the myth, what is the metaphor, and how to proceed onwards. This became really apparent. I used to dismiss them as myth or something I'm not really interested in. But I was watching a discussion of J. Krishnamurti with a lot of scientists, and he agreed with a lot of mystical things that I mentioned. So, how is such a thing even possible? Like, I just want to realize what is the limitations and what is all the myth that I should discard
Well,
while
it
approaching
doesn't.
something.
It's all a myth to you.
Yep.
Everything's a myth. So it doesn't matter if I tell you, well, this is real and this is unreal. This is possible and this is impossible. That's just window dressing. It doesn't mean anything. So everything is a myth until you discover the truth for yourself. So it doesn't, to pursue something based upon that thing being real and that thing you're told is unreal means that you're basically in the ocean without a sail. So you have to discover what has resonance for you and move according to that, rather than trying to follow belief and basically descriptive opinions about what is real and what is unreal.
What's the difference between chasing pleasure versus pursuing something that will actually bring long-term fulfillment?
Well, you just described the difference.
Hi Kapil, just a small question. I run a company with 300 people for the last 10 years, but at 50 years of age I realized that I haven't done much. It was just supposed to happen, and there is not much that I have done. It was just happened. So, and then that has left me a little rattled, but I think that is also a good state to be, because I feel that not much, it was just supposed to happen. And is it correct to think like that? I just wanted your view on that.
I mean, there's no correct way to think. I mean, I don't, if that's your question, is it correct or not, there really is no answer. There's no good and bad. There's no correct or incorrect. Everyone has their unique way of doing things. So that question doesn't really go anywhere. Do not raise your hand unless you have a question, and if you do, you may ask it when you're invited on stage.
I find myself engaged in two kinds of activities. The first one is something that arises out of a genuine curiosity, a genuine following, a genuine desire to do it. The other kind arises from some kind of an addictive behavior, either because of social media, the attention economy, or some deep seated emotional issues that I'm doing something compulsively. I find it very difficult to differentiate between those two, because both the genuine desire and the social media and other attention economy, all those things, both of those things feel very similar subjectively. This is my acute problem that I'm dealing with. Is there anything you can do to shed light on it? Thank you.
No, but there's something that you can do. I don't think that you have a difficulty deciphering between that which arises from a genuine place and that which arises from a cosmetic place. Because if there was no difference for you, then you wouldn't have been able to separate them categorically at the very outset of your question.
My question is, does a person have to be ready or primed for a transformation to happen? Like, for example, if a person is constantly seeking pleasure, will that corrupt him from transforming or really imbibing truth?
So, the primed and the readiness. Well, basically, it is that if there's a truth that is spoken, if one is not even in the vicinity of that, in terms of being ready to hear that, then it'll be like speaking Chinese to someone, who lives in Texas. So there has to be some degree of readiness, and where that is, how that comes about, whatever it is. But most human beings are not ready for truth because they've been conditioned and they've been taught and they've been led in the direction of belief, opinion, dogma, and all of these other things. So that's all they've ever known. And therefore, to expect that someone would be ready when the other is all they've ever known is not very practical. But for whatever reason, some people are. Some people are closer to readiness than others, and even if that came about through a priming in the sense of having read a bunch of scriptures or even looking into spirituality or whatever it may be, not that those things are necessarily truth, and spirituality certainly isn't truth, but the very fact that they've been pursuing such endeavors for many years demonstrates an internal desire and a DNA and a natural interest towards such things, which itself perhaps paves the way for some degree of readiness.
Hi, Kapil. It's an honor, as always. I have a question. So, as my understanding and sincerity of the nature of truth matures, it seems like I become available to truth more readily, and insights just seem to come from time to time, as my exposure also is systematic, as you said. So once the general direction is kind of set, I have seen that the path absolutely opens up. My question is, in the domain of the mind and dismantling self-image, from a standpoint of effectiveness and of not wasting time, is it still a matter of content and seeing truth from different angles in order to get it into the viscera? Or will I be able to access the needed truth by my sincerity alone?
I mean, how it happens, no one can really say. It is different for everyone, and it's not predictable. So whether it comes through content or simply exposure or a combination thereof, or deeply and motivationally and in a deeply obsessive and driven fashion to experiment for oneself, regardless of the exposure or because of the exposure. There's so many variables. There's so many possible intersections. So many things that can line up in various different ways. So that really isn't a question that can be predicted. However it happens. But perhaps the safest thing to say is the more naturally obsessive one is about anything, then certainly exponentially the greater the possibility of arriving.
Thank you.
Does procrastination always come from a place of fear of failure, or there is something more to discover there?
I'm not sure it really matters, because even if you discover that procrastination, it does come from certain specific places, but it may not even be worth talking about, because even if one discovers that it comes from X, the very fact that one is procrastinating means that the X is not what they really want to know about it. Otherwise, it would mean more to them. So it doesn't matter. It's intellectual.
Hello. Hi. Namaskar, Kapil. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk. My question is, how do I develop conviction on path which I am following? After reading so many scripture or thinking about things.
There's no how to. There's no how do I develop